or young Indigenous Australians finding themselves removed from their families. The Shadow Minister for Indigenous Australians, Linda Burney, joined me earlier from Sydney. Linda Burney, thank you for joining us on Capitol Hill. When we look at this closing the gap issue, both the targets that are put in place by the government and also this pledge from both the government and from the opposition to try to improve our progress in meeting those targets, it would be pretty easy to think that the broader Australian population is failing when it comes to improving the lot of Indigenous Australians. What do you think is the key message that should go out to the Australian community about how we're tracking?
The key message is that everyone has a responsibility here, and it is true that all of the social determinants, whether they be health, housing, education, and things like life expectancy, there is a failure.
Is it concerning that of the now 17 targets that are there, we only have data to really map out progress on 7 of those key areas? We don't even know if we're tracking that well on some of the areas that have been identified as areas for improvement.
Data is absolutely crucial. I am very much in favour of an evidence-based approach to all things, actually. And if there's anything or any part of what we do is having an evidence base to the programs we're putting in place for First Nations Australians, for the obvious reasons, the things that we've already discussed. Data is also absolutely critical to First Nations community-based organisations. Data improves your output, directs your output, and also, very importantly, measures it.
The Coalition has pledged $1 billion for a range of new initiatives to try to help the nation meet those targets. Is this just a situation of having to throw money at these circumstances that are facing the Indigenous population over the next couple of years, or do you think that there needs to be an ongoing commitment to continually reassess progress and reassess those funding levels?
The whole point of the new arrangements with closing the gap is to reassess, reprioritise. That's the theory behind it. I think the real question for me, with the $1 billion that the Coalition has announced today, is where is the money coming from? Is it new money, or is it some tricky way of balancing up an accounting trick? I suspect that that's the case, and obviously I'll be looking further into that. But really, the issue for First Nations Australians is economic development, which is why the Labor Party has concentrated so much on employment, both the CDP program through the public sector and, importantly, through Corporate Australia. Those issues are so important to developing an economic base for First Nations communities. And of course, the Rangers program, which is not only about employment, it's also about healing country and fixing country.
One of the areas of greatest concern is when it comes to the criminal justice system, and some of the concerns are about Indigenous incarceration, young Indigenous Australians in detention. Do you think, how likely do you think it is that we can close the gap when so much of the control over implementing those policies rests with state and territory governments? We've seen considerable debate over the last couple of years of the inconsistencies in how certain things like bail arrangements and that are actually applied, particularly with the Indigenous community.
Well, I can completely agree with you. You're very right to highlight this particular issue. Anthony Albanese also did in his speech today in the Parliament. We are on record for believing that the justice targets are not ambitious enough, and that's something that I would like to see, more ambition with those justice targets. Labor has already announced $91 million towards the issue of keeping people out of jail, particularly young people, through justice reinvestment programs. There is also a huge need which we're investing into, and that is for families to be able to participate in the coronial inquest inquiries. There's been over 400 people die in custody or in police pursuits since the Royal Commission, which was 30 years ago. It's a completely unacceptable situation.
Something that has been garnering a lot of debate in public over the last couple of years is the issue of lifting the age of criminal responsibility from where it currently sits at around 10 years of age across the country to 14. Is that something that you think should happen?
Yes, I do. I am very disappointed, as is the party, in a sense that this has fallen off the COAG agenda. There is a real role for leadership here from the federal arena, and unfortunately we're not seeing that. The ACT, where you're broadcasting today, has done something about it and lifted the age of criminal responsibility to 14. Where federal Labor is at the moment is that we are arguing that 10 is far too young, and we'll come to a position about an appropriate age, but 10 is way too young. I mean, people watching today think about their 10-year-olds. They're children, and they should not be locked up.
Linda Burney, thank you for your time.
Thank you.